Welcome to the Unmuted Podcast. My name is Jeff Waldman, the host of the podcast and also founder of Scale HR. You want to welcome you here, today, where we talk about all things HR, talent, HR tech, work tech, diversity, inclusion, everything to do with the workplace. And so, we are just to remind you that we drop new episodes every Thursday morning, and these episodes live on our website at GoScaleHR.com and also our YouTube channel. So don't forget to smash that like button, add your comment to it, and then also hit the small little bell shape so you can be notified of new videos, that are being dropped. And so we have a fantastic topic today. It's called Bridging the Feedback Gap with AI. So those that know me know that I love technology, and obviously AI has exploded onto the scene in a mainstream way during the last year or so. So this is a really good topic, and have a really good guest, Ansel Duff, who I'll bring in shortly. But I just wanted to share, my candid thoughts about this topic. So obviously feedback, has been a huge thing in our workplaces for, quite some time. And I think it's safe to say that the old school way of top-down communication has changed, quite a bit to a continuous feedback, regular check-ins, coaching conversations, opportunity, for employees to give and get feedback more frequently. And I think the emphasis isn't so much on, punishment or those types of things, but more on personal development and growth. And so there's a strong correlation, positive correlation to employee engagement. And, so that's why we've seen this noticeable shift in how leaders and employees connect and sort of work together from a feedback standpoint. Problem has been, how do you scale it? Because obviously every hour of time that is spent on this, I guess theoretically, is time taken away from head down work. And so how do you scale all of this? And so this is where we've seen a massive explosion of technology. And so whether it be standalone solutions like Lattice, 50, and many others, or modular solutions, like Hibob, Rippling, and a whole bunch of others that are, creating tools that work team can use. But are we really at a place where technology is actually helping us, to achieve what we want, or is it causing more headache? And in this session topic, gaps. So obviously we're making the argument that there are gaps. Otherwise I wouldn't have put it in the heading. So I want to bring in our guest, Ansel Duff, based in New York City, and he's going to help us break it all down for us. And so Ansel, I just want to welcome you to the Unmuted.
Thank you so much for having me, Jeff. It's great to be here.
Excellent. So when we were talking about this episode, obviously it's a perfect topic today. And, I don't know about your background in not HR, it's more, technology. But I guess maybe you can just start off by telling us what you do, what your background is.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm the CEO of a software business called Fordi, and we're essentially an AI copilot for teams. And what we do is we offer self-service tooling to get teams sort of action and answers that they need in seconds, incorporated into the flow of work. Principally as sort of three verticals that we do this through. The first is task level feedback. And this is sort of just real-time feedback around a task or project incorporated in the flow of work. It's done through a single message in the apps that you already use. The second is around sort of knowledge sharing or knowledge transfer. And this is sort of Q&A or real-time search of the documents or knowledge base of an organization. And then the last is around coaching. And this is best practices or task level coaching, also incorporated in the flow of work. And all of these three verticals leverage artificial intelligence to deliver them in seconds. So do something very quickly that would otherwise take weeks or potentially even months.
And so your background, not in HR, so you've come up through other business functions. So what were those? And then what prompted you to actually start this? Because obviously, there's certain reasons why people start companies and build software.
Yeah, absolutely. People and solutions attacking that problem. But when you get to the sort of task level or the project level, the two are fairly divorced from one another. And the latter bucket is really what my business targets. So the whole reason that I founded this was just to address issues that I had seen in my own flow of work and then in the businesses that I was investing in.
Fantastic. Okay. So let's get right into it. I mean, obviously we're talking about gaps here. And then obviously connecting that to AI. So what do you see as the gap when it comes to feedback and what's not working?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I would sort of bucket it into three categories. The first is probably the most important, and it's really around the construct of how teams ingest and collect and handle feedback. And the reason that I'm so focused on this is that a lot of teams really couple the idea of feedback as a performance management concept. And because a lot of organizations, frankly, think about performance management pretty infrequently, That also means that they're really thinking about feedback pretty infrequently, which is fine, I suppose, from a performance management perspective, because that process is so well established. But it's very different, honestly, than a business outcome or a business case around this is our project, this is our task, this is what we're delivering on to generate earnings. And so feedback really isn't a performance management concept. It's really a business concept. And by thinking of it alongside performance management really infrequently, we're really doing ourselves an enormous disservice, sending it through these really structured surveys and doing it once a year as opposed to in real time. So the framing for this is also really important because a lot of organizations it's kind of like push versus pull framing. Instead of, hey, take my survey now and I need to know how strongly you align with our organization's values and these really rigid and structured questions, I'm trying to flip that on its head a bit and turn it into help me help you. So instead of take this survey once a year and do something that helps me, the organization, help me enable you to deliver on whatever it is that you're delivering on in our flow of work. So this construct and this framing is really important. And then some knock-on benefits of that are the frequency and self-service of it all. So not only making feedback just an always happening process, but allowing teams to have self-service capabilities that connect the giver and the recipient of the feedback automatically, as opposed to through some very structured survey process that needs to be analyzed and then articulated, with months of downtime in between. So the construct is really important. The second fundamental gap is around the tooling that's available. And I keep focusing on this survey idea because honestly, the vast majority of feedback tools out there are survey based. And that's great for performance management again, but it doesn't allow you to run a business. You can't frankly run a business off data points that you get once a year. And doing it through a survey is really structured in a kind of crappy user experience, honestly. The questions are really siloed. They don't always offer anonymity. And frankly, you need anonymity in order to get usable information. And they don't really provide a venue for unstructured discussions around business topics. So it's kind of a poor user experience around the tooling. And then the last thing I'll say would be a little bit softer, and that's around the culture of sort of how organizations handle feedback. Now, cultures have inertia. Changing a business's culture is a really difficult thing to do, but the writing is very clear in that, and the research and data are very clear in that the incoming demographics that are taking over the workplace demand everything in real time, especially around feedback. So giving them a survey-based tool that happens very infrequently just isn't going to cut it anymore. So there needs to be a construct change, frankly, that feedback is a business concept, not a performance management concept. Tooling that enables that to be a business concept, i.e. real-time and self-service. And then lastly, enable a culture of giving and sharing feedback at the project level and at the task level in real time and turning it into action. So that's how I would think about the gap is around those three buckets.
And so obviously there have been a lot of tools out there. I mean, as you mentioned, they're, falling short. And, so then you enter this concept of, AI. So can you just talk a bit about, how can AI bridge those gaps? Because look, I've been a HR tech, work tech, user for 25 years. And obviously I've used many different tools. And so, AI has been really interesting. So I'm really interested to hear how can AI bridge the gaps that you're talking about.
Yeah. And to your point before, there are a lot of solutions out there that advertise feedback in some capability. And honestly, there are some really impressive solutions out there, businesses that I very much look up to. And I think we're sort of attacking a different problem because a lot of them are attacking a performance management problem. And what Fordi is attacking is sort of task level flow of work type of problems. And the two, unfortunately, have been thought of historically separately, even though they're kind of one and the same. They're very much interrelated. But to answer your question around how artificial intelligence is the perfect catalyst to enable some of these desires that I'm talking about in real time and self-service. The first is around the user experience. Honestly, if you give people a lot of steps that they need to step through in order to accomplish something, the results are going to be poor and the engagement is going to be poor. So artificial intelligence does a miraculous job at allowing software to process unstructured data. And this is the first step for incorporating, maybe we move away from this really rigid survey into maybe a single message or an unstructured field. And artificial intelligence is the perfect medium to do that through with natural language processing. So I'll give you an example. Fordi allows somebody to share a piece of feedback just in a single message. And now historically that's been prohibitively difficult to process, right? We need to run sentiment analysis on it. We need to identify if we know who this feedback should go to and who the subject or the recipient is. We need to know if it's appropriate or inappropriate. So there's a lot of testing that needs to happen in order to enable that process, but it's possible to do that with artificial intelligence very reliably and very, very rapidly. Honestly, even a few years ago, that would have been prohibitively difficult. So the first is around the user experience of just processing unstructured data, sort of the flow of work type data. The second is almost a benefit of the first, which is around speed. Time is of the essence. So getting people the insights that they need at the task level, at the project level, just in the flow of work is critical. And we can use artificial intelligence to run a bunch of these tests, for lack of a better word, to do that. Fordi does that in a matter of a couple of seconds, not to, float our own boat a little bit, but we sort of invented a recursive process for testing a piece of feedback and then, getting a result and processing it, moving it throughout an organization in a couple of seconds. We're also patent pending on that technology. The last, or the third bucket, I should say, is around self-service. And I keep coming back to the self-service point intentionally in that we want to enable teams to be able to communicate through feedback or through automations on their own very, very quickly. And you can't enable that speed without enabling self-service. So what we try to avoid happening is feedback, as an example, needs to go into this black box where it needs to get reviewed and thought of. And whoever is controlling that black box, almost doesn't even make a difference. The problem is it sits there for some time. And then by the time that processing happens with a person, people are busy, obviously, it's far too late. The outcome is already predetermined at that point. So from a speed perspective, you almost need self-service. And then at the top level, you can also use artificial intelligence to analyze group level thinking. And this tends to be a bit, retroactive as opposed to in real time. But those retroactive insights are really valuable. And from a pure process control perspective, it's immensely powerful to enable just one standard process for adjusting and processing and analyzing feedback. So it's almost like a hierarchy there. We want to enable a good user experience. In order to do that, we need speed. And in order to enable speed, we need self-service. And then taking a step back, we need process control and sort of group level thinking that tends to be a bit retroactive in nature.
So that's pretty insightful. I mean, obviously AI is still very new for the mainstream user. I'm having regular conversation daily. We're doing training and workshopping and so on, and to try to teach people how to even get started. So do you have any tips on how we can ensure that we use AI for feedback responsibly? And I'm talking about think about bias, I'm thinking about data transparency, data security, privacy, fairness, all these types of things that are really, quite frankly, top of mind right now, for a lot of people.
Yeah. Absolutely. And as a sort of peanut gallery comment, and I'll go to bat in the comments if anyone wants to disagree with me about this, I strongly believe that artificial intelligence is very much so being incorporated into our flow of work. And there's still some public debate and public discourse around whether or not artificial intelligence is going to make its way into the workplace. I would very strongly argue that it already has. And this is absolutely happening at a very rapid pace. So if you want to sort of join that or try and fight it, I would say your life will be a lot easier to just join it and be enabled by it as opposed to trying to resist it. So as to your question of how to actually implement this and think about it, effectively every credible software business that touches a user is thinking about how to enable their service more easily with artificial intelligence. So over the coming handful of years, I would argue, you'll see all of these large become more and more and more AI enabled. So for the user's perspective, it's actually great because you don't really need to take a ton of action over the coming years in order to enable this. The vendors and the software solutions are already doing that, and they are spending an enormous amount of resources to do it. Now, the first step of this for an organization is around vendor selection. And honestly, every software company thinks a bit differently around how they use artificial intelligence and how it plays into their product. So I would encourage organizations to be very thoughtful when they're selecting a vendor to ensure that it really aligns with how their organization thinks about the flow of work and autonomy. And I'll give you an example. There's been tremendous discourse publicly around ATS systems and hiring and their automations that are enabled by AI, and for good reason. When you're selecting selecting job applicants, people's livelihoods using an AI-enabled algorithm, there are really important ramifications from that. And to your point of bias earlier, even in New York State now, it's a law that AI-enabled hiring decisions need to be audited routinely to prevent this sort of innate bias from happening. So the first step is vendor selection and ensuring that you're choosing a vendor that is culturally aligned. And if you're okay with some manager autonomy or manager automations, ensure that you are really okay at a substantive level and not at a superficial level. Because everything sounds great at the top level. We're going to save you money and time, but ensuring real cultural alignment is important. The second I would say is around auditing, natively retroactive. Once you have a system up and running, have a routine, maybe it's annual or every other quarter or something, discussion around whether or not the system is accomplishing what it was advertised to do. And that sort of dovetails with data control to eliminate things like audits or bias, and also around whether the artificial intelligence model that's powering these solutions is being trained on your confidential information. There's enormous discussion around this for good reason. I feel strongly that software solutions should not be training their own models that then get applied to other customers on their clients' proprietary and confidential information. You don't see as much of that, but it's worth having a negotiated point in your services agreement. For example, Fordi has a whole page on it in our contract around we will not train our model on your confidential information. I feel strongly about that. There's a lot of debate going on around this. And then, of course, the sort of last step in this is around thoughtful change management. And this is kind of management consulting one, incorporating a diverse stakeholder group, overtraining, over communicating, enabling the support resources over the long term, especially upfront to enable the success of this type of platform. But I think about it in those 4 steps: vendor selection, auditing, data control and training data, and then thoughtful change management.
Yeah, so that's a really good answer. Most of our viewers are not technical people. They're users of software. So either, HR leaders, recruiters, those types of things. And so, what I've been telling all of them is that, you don't have to be an expert in these things. What you need to do is to try to find people, in-house, maybe on the software team setup that can help you with this, but also really lean on your vendors to really work with you on this, because I think if they are selling away a software solution and they're claiming that it can do A, B, and C, it's absolutely imperative that they prove to you that it's actually ethical, it's transparent. They do their testing, auditing, all of that kind of stuff. They can show that to you. And if they can't, then that's a bit of a red flag. So I do appreciate you sharing those thoughts. So just as we sort of I guess maybe there's just what's the one thing that you could say to our viewers if they were to take anything away from this episode? What would that one thing be?
Yeah, it's funny. We're talking a lot about feedback and artificial intelligence. I'm going to be a little tongue in cheek and give 2 responses. The first is that whenever we're thinking about change in an organization, frankly, the fact that it's enabled by AI is almost a footnote. I always try and orient around 2 goals that need to be accomplished for any change in an organization. The first is, how is this going to increase our earnings? How is this going to increase our value as an organization, as an operating entity? Or really, how is this going to provide value to our customers? And if you can't achieve at least one of those, I think it's really difficult to justify a change. Now, artificial intelligence can do a pretty miraculous job at both of these tasks by enabling really complex associations that were previously prohibitively difficult computationally. So I always try and think about, change management and vendor selection through those 2 lenses. So for whether you're an HR professional or you're an operations professional, how is this driving earnings or how is this adding value to our customers that's my rubric right off the bat. And if I don't have a clear answer to either of those, at least one, of course, it's really difficult for me to get excited about a change or to get behind it. And then the second is around this topic of feedback and artificial intelligence. I would implore people to go and do the exploration around finding vendors that are aligned with them, that utilize artificial intelligence to accomplish a lot of the amazing things that it's capable of, especially around feedback, timeliness, self-service, process control, task level feedback loops. All these things are now possible using natural language processing and generative artificial intelligence. So it's almost exciting in a way to leverage a lot of these technologies in ways that honestly 3 years ago would have been basically impossible. So those are my 2 answers. Try and frame everything around how is this going to drive earnings and the value of our organization, or how is this driving customer value? And then AI is a great lubricant to do that. But frankly, it could be any number of media that have come and gone over the years, like the cloud migration, Web 2.0, all this great stuff. So I hope that answers your question.
That does. And you gave 2 things, not 1. That's okay. Yeah. That's fine. So that segues into my sort of, parting comment, which is this. AI, it's just getting started, obviously, within work tech. And I think we've already talked about that. And in terms of actually supporting companies scale their business operations. So it's come fast and hard. It's like a big 10-ton boulder that's going downhill and it's not stopping. And so we must continue to keep an open mind. So viewers, members of the HR recruiting community, it's critical. It's really important that you keep that open mindset. You have conversations, with each other, but also, as Ansel pointed out, don't be afraid to actually try it out. For example, Gemini or, Chat, GPT, or other solutions like, Fordi, give it a go, give it a try it out. It doesn't hurt. And it's always, really important to, stay on top of what's happening in the technology world. So, Ansel, thank you for being here. And, thanks for helping us break down, what the gaps are with feedback and how AI has played a role in that. So. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It was great to join.
Audio Jungle.